75 lives. One night, 0 bullets fired. May 5th, 1945, Okinawa Japanese Empire. American forces are assaulting a 400-foot escarpment the soldiers call Hacksaw Ridge because fighting there is like being fed through meat grinder. And after hours of brutal combat, the order comes to retreat. Everyone falls back down the cliff, except one man, a Meg named Desmond Doss, who refuses to leave because there are wounded Americans still up there, and for the next 12 hours he stays alone on top of Hacksaw Ridge under constant Japanese fire, moving between wounded soldiers, dragging them to the cliff edge, lowering them down on rope one at a time, while praying the same prayer over and over, "Please, Lord, help me get one more." And by dawn, he saved 75 lives, becoming the only conscientious objector in American history to receive the Medal of Honor. The soldier who wouldn't touch a weapon, but became a weapon himself, saving lives instead of taking them. This isn't the story of a warrior who killed hundreds. This is the story of a warrior who saved hundreds, while everyone else was trying to kill him. The medic who proved that courage isn't always about what you're willing to destroy, but sometimes about what you're willing to preserve. The soldier who went into the worst battle of the Pacific War carrying nothing but his faith and a first aid kit, and came out having accomplished what armed men couldn't, proving that the most dangerous thing on a battlefield isn't always firepower, but absolute commitment to principle. Desmond Doss wasn't supposed to be a war hero. He was supposed to be a coward. That's what his fellow soldiers thought when he refused to touch a rifle. That's what his commanding officers thought when they tried to have him court-martialed. That's what everyone thought until the night he stayed on Hacksaw Ridge alone and saved 75 lives without firing a single shot. Subscribe for impossible courage. Let's begin. Desmond Thomas Doss, born February 7, 1919 in Lynchburg, Virginia, wasn't supposed to be a soldier at all. He was supposed to be a carpenter like his father, growing up in working-class family during the Depression, learning trades and skills, attending Seventh-day Adventist church every Saturday, which is their Sabbath. And the Seventh-day Adventist faith teaches specific things about violence and warfare. They believe in the 10 Commandments, literally, including, "Thou shalt not kill." They observe Saturday as Sabbath, meaning no work from Friday sunset to Saturday sunset, and they're pacifists, who believe Christians shouldn't take human life under any circumstances. So Desmond grows up with these beliefs deeply embedded, not just religious rules, but core identity, who he is as a person. When he's young, maybe 10 or 11 years old, something happens that burns this belief even deeper into his consciousness. His father is World War I veteran, Thomas Doss, and like many World War I veterans, Thomas has what we'd now call PTSD, struggles with alcohol. And one night when Desmond is a child, there's violent argument between his parents. His father pulls a gun on his mother, and young Desmond has to intervene, has to get the gun away from his father to prevent murder. And this traumatic childhood incident reinforces his belief that guns and violence destroy families, that weapons in hands of good people can still cause tragedy. And from that moment, Desmond is even more committed to his pacifist faith, convinced that he will never touch a weapon, never point a gun at another human being, never participate in killing. But Desmond Doss isn't a coward. He's physically brave and willing to serve. He just won't kill. And this distinction is crucial to understanding him. Many conscientious objectors during World War II refuse all military service. They go to prison or they do alternative service as civilians. But Desmond wants to serve his country. He believes the war against Japan and Germany is a just war. He wants to help defeat tyranny. He just believes his contribution should be saving American lives, not taking enemy lives. So when he's drafted in April 1942 at age 23, he doesn't refuse the draft. He enlists willingly and volunteers to be combat medic, a role that lets him serve in combat without carrying a weapon. Decision seems reasonable to Desmond, but it creates immediate massive problems because the United States Army in 1942 doesn't really understand or accommodate conscientious objectors who want to serve in combat. They have category for conscientious objectors who refuse all military service, and they have category for regular soldiers who carry weapons. But a medic who refuses weapon while serving in combat infantry unit, that's an anomaly the system doesn't know how to handle. And Desmond's commanding officers and fellow soldiers view his stance as cowardice disguised as religion. They think he's trying to avoid danger while pretending to be righteous. They think he's going to get his fellow soldiers killed because he won't provide covering fire, and they're determined to break him, to force him either to pick up a weapon or to quit. Training at Fort Jackson, South Carolina, 1942, is hell for Desmond Doss. His fellow trainees physically abuse him. They beat him in the barracks at night. They steal his Bible. They put his boots in latrine. They do everything possible to make him quit. And his drill sergeants and officers make it equally clear he's not wanted. They give him the worst details, the hardest labor. They punish his entire unit for his refusal to train with weapons, hoping peer pressure will break him. They tell him directly that he's a coward and a liability, and that real men carry rifles. And through all of this, Desmond refuses to fight back, refuses to retaliate, refuses to quit. He absorbs the abuse silently, keeps doing his duties, keeps training as medic, keeps attending church every Saturday, which creates additional friction because Saturday training is mandatory, but his faith prohibits work on Sabbath. His commanding officer, Captain Jack Glover, tries to have Desmond discharged on psychiatric grounds, claiming his refusal to bear arms is evidence of mental defect. But Desmond's psychiatric evaluation shows he's completely sane, just religiously committed, so that fails. Then they try to have him court-martialed for refusing direct orders to train with weapons, but the charges are complicated because technically the military does have provisions for conscientious objectors, and Desmond is willing to serve, he's just not willing to kill. So the legal case is unclear, and eventually the charges are dropped, partly because military lawyers aren't sure they can make it stick, and partly because by this point it's becoming clear that Desmond Doss, despite being the most hated man in his unit, is actually an exceptionally skilled and dedicated medic. During training exercises, Desmond demonstrates obsessive commitment to medical care. When soldiers get injured, even in minor training accidents, Desmond is there immediately, treating them with skill that exceeds what's expected of combat medic. He studies medical techniques constantly, practices bandaging and splinting and treating shock. He's stronger than he looks and can carry wounded men who outweigh him. And most importantly, he's fearless about running toward danger to help someone who's hurt. While other trainees hesitate, Desmond moves immediately toward casualties. And gradually, some of his fellow soldiers start to realize that maybe having a medic who's this dedicated might not be the worst thing, even if he won't carry rifle. But the tension doesn't fully resolve until combat. Desmond is assigned to Company B, 1st Battalion, 307th Infantry Regiment, 77th Infantry Division, which deploys to Pacific Theater in 1944, and their first major combat is Battle of Guam, July 1944. And this is where Desmond Doss proves himself. When the shooting starts and men start falling wounded, Desmond moves through gunfire without hesitation, treating casualties under fire, dragging wounded to safety, and he does this repeatedly. Every time someone yells medic, Desmond runs toward the shooting, not away from it. And soldiers who've been mocking him for months suddenly realize that this unarmed man is braver than armed men, that he's exposing himself to enemy fire to save them, that his refusal to kill doesn't mean he's afraid to die. After Guam, the attitudes shift. Desmond is no longer the coward, he's the medic who runs into fire, and his company starts to respect him. They still don't fully understand his religious convictions, but they understand that he'll risk his life for them, and that's what matters in combat. And Captain Glover, who tried to have him discharged, later admits he was wrong, later says Desmond is bravest soldier he ever commanded. And this sets the stage for what happens on Okinawa. April 1st, 1945, Easter Sunday, ironically, the United States invades Okinawa, the last major battle before the planned invasion of Japanese home islands. And Okinawa is critical because it's only 350 miles from mainland Japan, perfect base for bombing raids and invasion staging. But Japanese know this too, and they've fortified Okinawa with 100,000 troops dug into caves and bunkers with orders to fight to death. And the battle is going to cost over 12,000 American lives and over 100,000 Japanese lives, making it bloodiest battle in Pacific theater. Desmond's unit, the 77th Infantry Division, is assigned to capture the Maeda Escarpment, a 400-foot-high cliff that's part of Japanese defensive line cutting across southern Okinawa, and the Americans call it Hacksaw Ridge because the fighting there is so brutal. It's a sheer cliff face that has to be climbed under fire. Japanese defenders are dug into caves at the top with perfect fields of fire. They can shoot down at Americans trying to climb cargo nets up the cliff face. And once Americans reach the top, they're immediately in close quarters combat with Japanese soldiers who emerge from tunnels and caves. Fighting is hand-to-hand with grenades and rifles and bayonets, and the casualty rate is catastrophic. April 29th through May 5th, 1945, Desmond's company makes repeated attempts to take Hacksaw Ridge, and each time they climb the cliff, and each time they get driven back by Japanese counterattacks, and each time Desmond is there treating wounded under fire. But May 5th is different. May 5th is when everything goes wrong, and Desmond Doss does the impossible. May 5th, 1945. Company B assaults Hacksaw Ridge again. They climb the cargo nets to the top. They establish position on the ridge. Fighting is intense. Japanese resistance is fanatical. Soldiers are falling wounded constantly, and Desmond is moving between them, treating them, dragging them to cover. And this goes on for hours. The ridge becomes a slaughterhouse. American casualties are mounting, and then Japanese launch major counterattack. They come out of the caves in force. They overrun American positions with grenades and close combat, and the order comes down to retreat. All American forces are to withdraw down the cliff immediately because the position is being overrun. Everyone starts pulling back. Wounded who can move help each other toward the cargo nets. Soldiers provide covering fire as they retreat, and Desmond starts helping wounded get to the cliff edge. But when he looks around, he realizes there are still wounded Americans up there. Men too badly hurt to move on their own. Men who are lying in shell craters or behind rocks. And if everyone retreats, those men will be left behind. They'll be captured or killed by Japanese forces. And Desmond makes a decision that should be impossible. He decides to stay, alone, on top of Hacksaw Ridge while everyone else retreats to get those wounded men down. His fellow soldiers tell him to come. His officers order him to retreat. Everyone is falling back because the position is untenable. But Desmond refuses. He says he has to get the wounded. And before anyone can physically drag him away, he moves back into the combat zone, searching for casualties, and his company retreats down the cliff, leaving Desmond Doss alone on top of Hacksaw Ridge, surrounded by Japanese forces. What happens next is the longest night of Desmond's life. From late afternoon May 5th through dawn May 6th, he's alone on that ridge, and he works methodically. He moves through the combat zone, finding wounded Americans. Some are unconscious, some are crying for help, some are trapped in positions where Japanese can see them. And Desmond treats their wounds, stops their bleeding, gives them water, and then he drags them or carries them to the cliff edge. And here's where it gets physically impossible. The cliff is 400 feet high, almost vertical. There's cargo netting, but Desmond can't send wounded men down the netting by themselves because most are too badly hurt to climb. So he improvises a rope system. He finds rope, probably from the cargo nets or from military equipment, and he ties bowline knots, creates a litter system, and he lowers wounded men down the cliff one at a time, 400 feet of cliff. And he does this by himself. No help. He positions the wounded man in the rope litter, loops it around tree or rock as anchor point, and hand over hand, he lowers the rope until the wounded man reaches the bottom, where other medics can retrieve him. And then he pulls the rope back up and goes to find another wounded man. And he does this over and over through the night. The physical demand is extraordinary. Lowering a wounded man 400 feet requires incredible upper body strength. Desmond weighs maybe 130 pounds. Some of the wounded men weigh twice that, and he's lowering them by hand, rope burning his hands, muscles screaming, and he does it 75 times. And between each rescue, he's crawling through combat zone under Japanese fire because the Japanese are still up there. They're patrolling, they're shooting at anything that moves, and Desmond is moving constantly, searching for wounded. And somehow, the Japanese don't kill him, whether through divine providence or luck, or because Japanese soldiers don't bother shooting individual medic, or because darkness provides cover. Somehow, Desmond survives the night. And through all of this, he's praying. Every time he lowers a wounded man, he prays, "Please, Lord, help me get one more." And when that man is down, he goes back and finds another and prays the same prayer, "Please, Lord, help me get one more." And this becomes his mantra through the night. One more, just one more, get one more down. And the number keeps growing, 10 men, 20 men, 30 men, and he keeps going, one more, until by dawn he saved 75 men, lowered them down Hacksaw Ridge by himself while surrounded by enemy forces. Dawn, May 6th, Desmond finally retreats down the cliff himself, physically exhausted, hands raw from rope burns. And when he reaches the bottom, his company is stunned. They thought he was dead. They're sure he died up there. But here he is. And the wounded men he saved are being treated at aid stations, and word spreads through the division about what the medic did. The conscientious objector who wouldn't carry weapon just saved 75 lives in one night by himself. And the respect that began on Guam becomes something more, becomes reverence, because what Desmond did is beyond normal courage. It's sacrificial, it's Christ-like in its self-sacrifice, spending 12 hours in hell saving others. But Desmond's war isn't over. May 21st, 1945, his unit is back in combat on Okinawa, different location, and Desmond is hit by grenade shrapnel, wounds to his legs and lower body, and he treats his own wounds because, of course he does, and then he waits for stretcher bearers to evacuate him. But while waiting, he sees another soldier get wounded worse, and Desmond gives up his stretcher to the other wounded man and waits for another stretcher. And while waiting, he's hit again, this time by sniper bullet that shatters his arm, fractures his humerus, and now he's seriously wounded twice, and finally he's evacuated, and his war is over. His injuries require months of recovery. The arm injury is severe. Doctors initially think they might have to amputate, but they save the arm. And while recovering in military hospital, Desmond learns he's been awarded the Medal of Honor, the first conscientious objector in United States history to receive the nation's highest military decoration. And the citation specifically mentions Hacksaw Ridge, specifically mentions 75 lives saved. And President Truman personally presents the medal to Desmond at White House ceremony October 12, 1945. And Truman says he'd rather have this medal than be president. And Desmond, in his typical humility, says he doesn't feel like he did anything special. He was just doing his duty. Post-war, Desmond's life is harder than his war service. The injuries from Okinawa never fully heal. His arm has limited function, he develops tuberculosis from exposure during the war, loses a lung and 5 ribs in surgery, spends 5 years in Veterans Administration hospitals, loses hearing from antibiotic treatments, and by the time he's 40, he's physically disabled, can't work regular job, and he and his wife Dorothy struggle financially. And Desmond never complains, never seeks compensation beyond his military benefits, never trades on his Medal of Honor for personal gain. He just lives quietly in Georgia, attends church, gives occasional talks to church groups about his faith, and raises his son. He becomes minor celebrity after the war. His story is featured in magazines and newspapers. The Conscientious Objector documentary film, 1951, tells his story. And over the decades, various filmmakers approach him about making a movie about Hacksaw Ridge, but Desmond refuses them all because he doesn't want Hollywood to sensationalize or distort what happened. He doesn't want his story turned into action movie where he's portrayed as hero. He sees himself as servant who did his duty, and he only agrees to film adaptation late in life when Mel Gibson convinces him the film will respect his faith and the reality of what happened. Throughout his life, Desmond maintains his Seventh-day Adventist faith absolutely, still observes Sabbath, still refuses to touch weapons, still believes in literal interpretation of "thou shalt not kill."
And when people ask him how he survived Hacksaw Ridge, he always credits divine intervention, says God protected him because he was doing God's work, saving lives. And this isn't false modesty. He genuinely believes it, genuinely sees himself as instrument of God's will, not as individual hero. And this humility, combined with extraordinary courage, is what makes him unique. March 23, 2006, Desmond Doss dies at age 87 in Alabama, having lived 61 years after Hacksaw Ridge, and his obituaries note that the conscientious objector who wouldn't kill became one of the most decorated combat medics in American history. And the Medal of Honor citation is read again, and people remember the 75 lives saved, and the lesson of Desmond Doss is reasserted, that courage can manifest in different forms, that sometimes the bravest act isn't taking life, but preserving it, that moral conviction combined with willingness to sacrifice creates different kind of heroism. The question of how Desmond Doss survived Hacksaw Ridge night is worth examining, because the odds against survival are astronomical. He's alone on a ridge controlled by enemy forces for 12 hours, moving constantly in combat zone, exposed to gunfire and grenades. And he's not just surviving, he's actively working, dragging casualties, rigging rope systems, lowering men down cliff. And through all this, he's never hit, and the mathematical probability of this is essentially zero, which is why Desmond credits divine intervention, and why even non-religious observers acknowledge something extraordinary happened that night beyond normal explanation.
His decision to stay when everyone else retreated demonstrates different kind of courage than the warriors we've discussed previously. Soldiers like Mad Jack Churchill or Simo Häyhä demonstrated courage by engaging enemy more effectively than anyone expected. Desmond demonstrated courage by refusing to engage enemy at all while still accomplishing mission impossible for armed men. He saved 75 lives using nothing but medical skills and faith and rope. And in doing so, he proved that military effectiveness doesn't always correlate with lethality, that saving lives can be as tactically valuable as taking them, especially when it preserves fighting force and maintains morale. The physical achievement of lowering 75 men down 400-foot cliff by hand is comparable to elite athletic performance. Each man lowered requires approximately 800 feet of rope movement, 400 down, 400 back up. 75 men means 60,000 feet of rope movement. That's over 11 miles of rope handling, and that's not counting the crawling and dragging and treating and searching. Desmond probably covered several miles of ground on that ridge searching for casualties, and he did all this while sleep-deprived and terrified and under fire, and his body was running on pure adrenaline and faith. The psychological dimension is equally extraordinary. Most people in life-threatening situations experience fight or flight response. Survival instinct says escape danger, and when Desmond's entire company retreated, that was the rational response. Staying alone in combat zones surrounded by enemy is suicide. But Desmond overrode his survival instinct through moral conviction. His belief that he had duty to wounded men outweighed his fear of death, and this is similar to what we see in other extreme acts of courage, the moment when moral or mission imperative becomes stronger than self-preservation. But Desmond sustained this for 12 hours. That's not momentary courage, that's sustained conscious decision to remain in mortal danger. The comparison to other Medal of Honor recipients shows how unusual Desmond's citation is. Most Medal of Honor actions involve killing large numbers of enemies or sacrificing life to save others. Desmond's citation is unique in that it's entirely about saving lives without taking any. He didn't kill a single Japanese soldier, didn't fire a single shot, and yet his tactical contribution was arguably greater than many combat actions, because 75 saved American soldiers represent 75 men who could return to combat, 75 families who got their sons or husbands or fathers back, and the morale impact on his division was incalculable. Everyone knew about the medic who stayed alone on Hacksaw Ridge. The religious dimension can't be separated from Desmond's story. His Seventh-day Adventist faith wasn't a superficial belief system he could compromise when convenient. It was a core identity that shaped every decision, and the tension between his faith and military service created the circumstances for his extraordinary achievement. If he'd been willing to carry a weapon, he would have been a regular combat medic, competent but not legendary. But because his faith absolutely prohibited killing, he had to find a different way to serve. And that different way turned out to be more effective than conventional approach, proving that religious conviction, properly applied, can enhance rather than limit effectiveness. The cultural impact of Desmond's story evolves over decades. Immediately post-war, he's celebrated as American hero, but also as a curiosity. The conscientious objector who won Medal of Honor is an interesting anomaly, but over time, as American society becomes more skeptical of military intervention and more appreciative of moral complexity, Desmond's story gains deeper resonance. He represents the possibility of serving country without compromising personal morality, of being simultaneously patriotic and pacifist, of finding a way to contribute that aligns with conscience. And this appeals to people who support military but question unlimited use of force.
The accuracy of 75 is sometimes questioned. Some historians suggest the actual number might have been higher or lower. Estimates range from 50 to 100 men saved that night. But 75 is the official number in Medal of Honor citation, and it's based on witness testimony and casualty records. And whether it's exactly 75 or approximately 75 doesn't change the fundamental achievement. Desmond saved dozens of men alone under fire through night when everyone else had retreated. The 2016 film Hacksaw Ridge, directed by Mel Gibson, brings Desmond's story to new generation, and the film is remarkably accurate to actual events. Gibson consulted extensively with Desmond before his death and with his son and fellow soldiers. And while film necessarily dramatizes and compresses some events, the core story is faithful to reality. And Gibson makes interesting decision to show the brutality of Okinawa combat graphically, making clear that Desmond's pacifism wasn't because he was sheltered from violence, but despite being immersed in the worst violence of the Pacific War, making his moral stance more rather than less impressive. The film's impact introduces millions of people to Desmond's story who wouldn't otherwise know it, and it creates interesting discussions about courage and faith and military service, and it validates Desmond's decision late in life to allow film adaptation, because the film treats his faith respectfully and doesn't turn him into action hero. It shows him as frightened human being who overcomes fear through faith, which is accurate to who he was.
The lesson of Desmond Doss for modern military is complicated. Military needs soldiers willing to use lethal force. Warfare requires killing enemy combatants. But Desmond proves that non-lethal roles can contribute as much or more than combat roles, that medics and support personnel are as crucial as infantry, and that military should accommodate diverse forms of service, including conscientious objection. And modern U.S. military does better job of this than World War II military did. There are clearer paths for conscientious objectors who want to serve, though tensions remain between military culture and pacifist conviction. If you know someone who's told their convictions are impractical, or their beliefs are incompatible with serving their country, or their moral standards prevent them from contributing to collective defense, someone who needs reminder that there are ways to serve that don't require compromising core values, share this story, not because everyone should be conscientious objector, but because sometimes the most effective contribution comes from holding firm to principles everyone else says you should abandon. That courage can manifest as saving lives instead of taking them, and that moral conviction, properly applied, can accomplish things that conventional approaches can't. Subscribe to this channel for more stories of warriors who succeeded through different paths, battles where courage meant something other than killing, and soldiers who proved that military service can align with, rather than contradict, deeply held beliefs. Hit the notification bell because we're bringing you proof that there are many forms of heroism, many ways to serve, and many paths to honor.
and that sometimes the person everyone thinks is wrong becomes the one who changes everything.
And remember, when you face situations where everyone says you have to compromise your principles to be effective, you have the same choice Desmond Doss had. You can abandon your convictions for practical reasons, or you can find a way to serve that honors both your values and your commitment. And if you choose the second path, you might discover, like Desmond did, that holding firm to what you believe while remaining willing to sacrifice makes you more effective, not less. That saving instead of destroying can accomplish strategic objectives, and that courage doesn't always look like what everyone expects. Desmond Doss saved 75 lives on Hacksaw Ridge without firing a shot because he believed saving life was his duty and killing was sin. And that combination of conviction and sacrifice made him a legend. What will you accomplish when you stop accepting that your beliefs limit your effectiveness?